Let's go, bitch. Wow. Pussies, huh? Or whatever. Maybe I take my car and I camp this because people are going to want to come and res their team, right? Once they're done fighting over here. I bet you. Mm-hmm. No one's gonna come over to try to call back? No way. Oh my god, I blind myself, chat. Can you believe it? Ooh, good job there, Alabaca. See, that's the angle that I thought I was covered, but I wasn't, because third person, I can't draw straight fucking lines, apparently. I apparently can't draw straight lines. I'm going to try a round of Call of Duty real quick. Oh, come on. I don't even know what this is. Like, why does it forget my password? I'm glad that was it. Jesus. So annoying. The fuck? Nine hours later. Match.
We're headed to the war zone. Get geared up and stand by.
Alright, I had to grab some channel. Gotta grab some chow.
Prep time's over. Now you deploy to the war zone.
Hmm.
You're clear to engage all hostiles.
I can't believe I upgraded that fucking gun. You've got a collapse moving in. The killed shipment is marked for quality gear. Be prepared for resistance. Viable killed shipment in the AO. Expect our position. Inserting armor. Come on. What the fuck, man? They just know where you are all the time and they just instantly beam you. I'm glad you didn't see that, chat. I'm glad the fucking game didn't even show up because this fucking game is so bad you can't game capture it. Good God, dude. So stupid, man.
Overcome what's probably the biggest problem in people's meditation. You know, how to overcome, transcend this mind, which is always thinking. And sometimes people keep telling me, oh, I can't meditate. I'm always thinking about something, thinking about anything, but I'm always thinking and I can't stop thinking. And that becomes one of the biggest obstacles to being a meditator. They cannot stop thinking. But the truth of the matter is, it's very easy to stop thinking. And a lot of people do it quite naturally. Very often they stop thinking. And there is a classic example, a demonstration, which I love doing on every retreat to show you how easy it is to stop thinking and what it feels like when you stop thinking. Because at least you can recognize, yes, it is possible, I can do it. And for many people, that is an amazing to realize, yes, they can stop thinking. It is possible, and they've actually experienced it. And the little demonstration is to ask you that when I am speaking, to also be aware of the reaction to my words inside your mind. So don't just listen to what I'm saying, also to listen to just what it does to you inside your mind. Because as I am speaking, as long as you're mindful inside a little bit, as I am speaking, you will begin to notice something strange. That between my words, there are long gaps. In those spaces,
Deployment to the war zone has been authorized.
what was happening in your mind?
Guess to just wait till she calls.
You were silent. You were aware, but not a thought was going on in your mind. You can do it. And this is what it feels like. Being aware, hearing the sounds of the birds, without a thought going on in your head. Easy, isn't it? Now just carry on for another 2 hours. Now you know what silence is and how beautiful it feels. Now we have to try and understand, why is it that we keep destroying the silence with all these thoughts? And you realize, you're all old enough now to realize that 99%, and I'm being quite generous, 99% of your thoughts are total rubbish. It's one of the reasons
Hunt down the enemy. located. Use it to hunt down and eliminate threats. The guild shipment is marked for quality gear. Be prepared for resistance. Death machine locked and loaded. A cradle bomb is being deployed to the war zone. Eyes up, soldier. Intel reports detonation of cradle bombs in the AO. Stay tight.
Site bombardment incoming. Stay in condition, Yellow.
cradle bomb is clearing. Enter the blast zone to obtain valuable loot.
Insert armor.
Death machine in the open. Rip.
Prepare for nearby contact fire. Death machine available.
Insert armor.
Detonated cradle bombs in the AO. Watch for chemical contamination.
All right, let's see here.
Here's this time for some target practice. The real thing's coming soon. Enemy soldier incoming.
Your fear of AI is the collapse of humanity.
Well, not the collapse, the abrupt extermination. There's a difference.
The AI Doc, or How I Became an Apocalyptimist. Rated PG-13. Only in theaters March 27th.
Atera is the IT painkiller. Remote monitoring and management. Remote access. Help desk and...
The following is a conversation with Jensen Huang. Plus, you have a complete disparate disciplines here.
All stations.
I'm sure you have specialists in each one of these. High bandwidth memory, the networking, the NV-Link, the NICs, the optics and the copper that you're doing, the power delivery, the cooling, all of that. I mean, there's like world experts in each of those. How do you get them in the room together to figure out?
My staff is so large.
What's the can you take me through the process of the specialists and the generalists? Like, how do you put together the rack when you know the set of things you have to shove into a rack together?
Yeah.
Like, what does that process look like, designing it all together?
There's the first question, which is, what is extreme co-design? You were optimizing across the entire stack of software, from architectures to chips to systems, the system software to the algorithms to the applications. That's one layer. The second thing that you and I just talked about goes beyond CPUs and GPUs and networking chips and scale-up switches and scale-out switches. And then, of course, you got to include power and cooling and all of that, because, you know, all these computers are extremely power hungry. They do a lot of work and they're very energy efficient, but they in aggregate still consume a lot of power. And so that's one. The first question is, what is it? The second question is, why is it? And we just spoke about the reason, you know, you want to distribute the workload so that you can exceed the benefit of just increasing the number of computers. And then the third question is, how is it? How do you do it? And that's kind of the miracle of this company.
I got some food out there for you if you want to eat it.
Computers.
There's you can put it on a.
You should first think about what is it that you want the company to produce. You know, I see a lot of companies' organization charts, and they all look the same.
Go lay down.
Organization charts, software organization charts, and car company organization charts, they all look the same. And it doesn't make any sense to me. You know, the goal of a company is to be the machinery, the mechanism, the system that produces the output. And that output is the product that we like to create. It is also designed, the architecture of the company should reflect the environment by which it exists. It almost directly says what you should do with the organization. My direct staff is 60 people. You know, I don't have one-on-ones with them because it's impossible. You can't have 60 people on your staff if you're, you know, going to get work done. And
so you still have 60 reports. You still have
more. Yeah.
More.
Yeah.
And most are at least have a foot in engineering.
Almost all of them. There's experts in memory. There's experts in CPUs. There's experts in optical. All GPUs and architecture, algorithms, design.
So you constantly have an eye on the entire stack, and you're having to do like intense discussions about the design of the entire stack.
And no conversation is ever one person. That's why I don't do one-on-ones. We present a problem, and all of us attack it. You know, because we're doing extreme co-design, and literally the company is doing extreme co-design all the time.
So even if you're talking about a particular component, like cooling, networking, everybody's listening.
There's no way.
And they can contribute. Well, this doesn't work for the power distribution. This doesn't. This doesn't work for the memory.
That dude's cheating.
This doesn't work for this.
Exactly. And whoever wants to tune out, tune out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because the people who are on the staff, they know when to pay attention. They're supposed, you know, if something they could have contributed to, they didn't contribute to, I'm going to call them out, you know, and say, hey, come on, let's get them here.
So, as you mentioned, NVIDIA is this company that's adapting to the environment. So, at which point do you say, did the environment change and began adapting sort of secretly in the early days from GPU for gaming, maybe the early deep learning revolution, to we're now going to start
Cheater.
as an AI factory.
100% cheating.
Produces AI. Let's build a factory that makes AI.
I could reason through it just systematically.
What the fuck, bro? Just aimbotting.
As an accelerator.
I'm done with this game forever.
But the problem with accelerators is that the application.
I'm actually done with this game.
It has the benefit of being incredibly optimized for the job. You know, any specialist has that benefit. The problem with intense specialization is that, of course, your market reach is narrower. But that's even fine. The problem is the market size also dictates your R&D capacity. And your R&D capacity ultimately dictates
Can't stand it, man.
the influence and impact that you can possibly have in computing. And so when we first started out as an accelerator, very specific accelerator, we always knew that was going to be our first step. We had to find a way to become accelerated computing. But the problem is when you become a computing company, it's too general purpose and it takes away from your specialization. I connected two words that are actually fundamental. Tension. The better computing company we become, the worse we became as a specialist. The more of a specialist, the less capacity we have to do.
Oh my god, PUBG. Why do you do this to me? Pretty
overall computing. And so and I connected those two words together on purpose, that the company has to find that really narrow path, step by step by step, to expand our aperture of computing, but not give up on the most important specialization that we had. Okay, so the first step that we took beyond acceleration was we invented the programmable pixel shader. So that was the first step towards programmability. It was our first journey towards moving into the world of computing. The second thing that we did was we put FP32 into our shaders. That FP32 step, IEEE compatible FP32, was a huge step in the direction of computing. It was the reason why all of the people who were working on stream processors and other types of data flow processors discovered us, and they said, hey, all of a sudden, we might be able to use this GPU that's incredibly computationally intensive, and it's now compliant with IEEE. I could take my software that I was writing previously on CPUs, and I could see about using the GPU for that. And which led us to put C on top of FP32, we call CG. That CG path took us to eventually CUDA. CUDA, step by step by step. Putting CUDA on GeForce, that was a strategic decision that was very, very hard to do because it cost the company enormous amounts of our profits, and we couldn't afford it at the time. But we did it anyways because we wanted to be a computing company. A computing company has a computing architecture. A computing architecture has to be compatible across all of the chips that we build.
Can you take me through that decision? So putting CUDA on GeForce could not afford to do. Can you explain that decision? Why boldly choose to do that anyway?
Yeah.
Can you explain that decision?
Excellent. That was the first. I would say that was the first strategic decision that is as close to an existential threat.
For people who don't know, it turned out to be, spoiler alert, one of the most incredibly brilliant decisions ever made by a company. So CUDA turned out to be an incredible foundation for computation in this AI infrastructure world. So you're just setting the context. It turned out to be a good decision.
Yeah, it turned out to be a good decision. I think here's the way it went. So we invented this thing called CUDA, and it expanded the aperture of applications that we can accelerate with our accelerator. The question is, how do we attract developers to CUDA? Because a computing platform is all about developers, and developers don't come to a computing platform just because it could perform something interesting. They come to a computing platform because the install base is large. Because a developer, like anybody else, wants to develop software that reaches a lot of people. So the install base is, in fact, the single most important part of an architecture. The architecture could attract enormous amounts of criticism. For example, no architecture has ever attracted more criticism than the x86. As a less than elegant architecture, but yet it is the defining architecture of today. It gives you an example that, in fact, so many RISC architectures, which were beautifully architected, incredibly well designed by some of the brightest computer scientists in the world, largely failed. And so I've given you two examples where one is, one's elegant, the other one's barely aesthetic. And so yet x86 survived. And
install base is everything.
Install base defines an architecture. Not everything else is secondary. Okay, and so there were other architectures at the time. CUDA came out, OpenCL was here. There were, there's several other competing architectures. But the decision that we made that was good was we said, hey, look, ultimately, it's about install base, and what is the best way we could get a new computing architecture into the world? By that time frame, GeForce had become successful. We were already selling millions and millions of GeForce GPUs a year. And we said, we ought to put CUDA on GeForce and put it into every single PC, whether customers use it or not, and use it as a starting point of cultivating our install base. Meanwhile, we'll go and attract developers, and we went to universities and wrote books and taught classes and put CUDA everywhere. And eventually people discover, and at the time the PC was the primary computing vehicle. There was no cloud, and we could put a supercomputer in the hands of every researcher in school, every scientist, every engineer in school, every student in school, and eventually something amazing will happen. Well, the problem was CUDA increased our cost of that GPU, which is a consumer product, so tremendously, it completely consumed all of the company's gross profit dollars. And so at the time, the company was probably, worth, I don't know at the time, $8 billion or something, like $6-7 billion or something like that. After we launched CUDA, I recognized that it was going to add so much cost, but it was something we believed in. Our market cap went down to like $1.5 billion, and so we were down there for a while, and we clawed our way back slowly, but we carried CUDA on GeForce. I always say that NVIDIA is the house that GeForce built, because it was GeForce that took CUDA out to everybody. Researchers, scientists, they discovered CUDA on GeForce because they were all, many of them were gamers. Many of them built their own PCs anyways. In a university lab, many of them built clusters themselves, using PC components, and so that that's kind of how we got going.
And then that became the platform, the foundation for the deep learning revolution.
That was also another great observation. Yeah.
That existential moment. Do you remember? What were those meetings like? What were those discussions like? Deciding as a company, risking everything.
Well, I had to make it clear to the board what we're trying to do, and the management team knew our gross margins were going to get crushed. So you could imagine a world where GeForce would carry the burden of CUDA, and none of the gamers would appreciate it, and none of the gamers would pay for it. You know, they only pay a certain price, and it doesn't matter what your cost is. And so, you know, we increased our cost by 50%, and that consumed, and we were a 35% gross margin company. And so it was quite a difficult decision to make. But you could imagine that someday this would go into workstations, and it would go into supercomputers, and in those segments maybe we can capture more margin. So you could reason your way into being able to afford this, but it still took a decade.
But that's more like conversation with the board, convincing them. But you psychologically, because NVIDIA's continued to make bold bets that predict the future, and in part, especially now, define the future. So I'm almost looking for wisdom about how you're able to make those decisions, to make leaps like that as a company.
Well, first of all, I'm informed by a lot of curiosity. At some point, there's a reasoning system that convinces me so clearly this outcome will happen, that this will happen, and so I believe it in my mind. And when I believe it in my mind, you know how it is. You manifest a future, and that future is so convincing. There's no way it won't happen. There's a lot of suffering in between, but you've got to believe what you believe.
So you envision the future.
Yeah.
And you essentially, from a sort of engineering perspective, manifest it.
Yeah, and you reason about how to get there. You reason about why it must exist, and you know, we all reason it here. The management team will reason about it. All the people that we spend a lot of time reasoning about it. The thing that the next part of it is probably a skill thing, which is, you know, oftentimes in leadership. The leadership stays quiet, or they learn about something and then they do some manifesto, and it's a brand new year, and somehow at the end of the year, next year, we're going to have a brand new plan, big huge layoff this way, big huge organization change this way, new mission statement, brand new logos, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We've just never, I never do things that way. When I learn about something and it's starting to influence how I think, I'll make it very clear to everybody near me that, you know, this is interesting. This is going to make a difference. This is going to impact that. And I reason about things step by step by step. Oftentimes, I've already made up my mind, but I'll take every possible opportunity, external information, new insights, new discoveries, new engineering, you know.
I think they just took off with the vehicle.
New milestones developed.
There might be another one in there.
Opportunities, and I'll use it to shape everybody else's belief system. And I'm doing that literally every single day. I'm doing that with my board. I'm doing that with my management team. I'm doing that with my employees. I'm trying to shape their belief system such that when I come, the day I say, hey, let's buy Mellanox, it's completely obvious to everybody that we absolutely should. On the day that I said, hey guys, let's go all in on deep learning, and let me tell you why. I've already been laying down the bricks to different organizations inside the company. Every organization and everybody, many of the people might have heard everything. Most of the company hears, of course, pieces of it. And on the day that I announce it, everybody's kind of bought into many pieces of it. And in a lot of ways, I like to announce these things. And I imagine that the employees are kind of saying, you know, Jensen, what took you so long? And in fact, I've been shaping their belief system for some time, and therefore leadership, sometimes it looks like you're leading from behind. But you've been shaping their, you know, to the point where on the day that I declared it, 100% buy-in. But that's what you want. You want to bring everybody along. You know, otherwise we announce something about deep learning and everybody goes, what are you talking about? You know, you announce something about let's go all in on this thing, and your management team, your board, your employees, your customers, they're kind of like, where's this coming from? You know, this is insane. And so GTC. In fact,
I should have had that
back in time,
headshot right there. I'm gonna watch that replay.
Also shaping the belief system of my partners in the industry, and I'm using that to shape
I can't because it's still going.
Of my own employees, and so by the time that I announce something, like for example, we just announced Grok. We've been late. I've been talking about the stepping stones for 2.5 years. You guys just go back and go, oh my gosh, they've been talking about it for 2.5 years. And so I've been laying the foundation step by step by step. So when the time comes, you announce it, everybody's, you know, what took you so long?
But it's not just inside the company. You're shaping the landscape, the broader global landscape of innovation. Like putting those ideas out there, you really are manifesting reality.
We don't build computers. We actually don't build clouds. We don't, as it turns out, we're a computing platform company. And so nobody can buy anything from us. That's the weird thing. You know, we vertically design, vertically integrate to design and optimize, but then we open up the entire platform at every single layer to be integrated into other companies' products and services and clouds and supercomputers and OEM computers. And so the amazing thing is I can't do what I do without having convinced them first. And so most of GTC is about manifesting a future that by the time that my product is ready, they're going, what took you so long?
Yeah. So one of the things you've been a believer for a long time is scaling laws broadly defined. So are you still a believer in the scaling laws?
Yeah, we have more scaling laws now.
So I think you've outlined 4 of them with pre-training, post-training, test time, and agentic scaling. What do you think when you think about the future, deep future and the near-term future, what are the blockers that you're most concerned about that keep you up at night, that you have to overcome in order to keep scaling?
Well, we can go back and reflect on what people thought were blockers. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, we were the pre-training scaling law. You know, people thought, rightfully so, that the amount of data that we have, high quality data that we have, will limit the intelligence that we achieve. And that scaling law was an important, very important scaling law. The larger the model, the correspondingly more data results in a smarter AI. And so that was pre-training. And Ilias said, we're out of data or something like that. Pre-training is over or something like that. The industry panicked. You know, that this is the end of AI. And of course, that's obviously not true. We're going to keep on scaling the amount of data that we have to train with. A lot of that data is probably going to be synthetic. And that also confused people, you know, and what people don't realize is that they've kind of forgotten that most of the data that we are training, that we teach each other with, inform each other with, is synthetic. You know, it's synthetic because it didn't come out of nature. You created it. I'm consuming it. I modify it, augment it. I regenerate it. Somebody else consumes it. And so we've now reached a level where AI is able to take ground truth, augment it, enhance it, synthetically generate an enormous amount of data. And that part of post-training continues to scale. And so the amount of data that we could use that is human-generated will be smaller and smaller and smaller. The amount of data that we use to train a model is going to continue to scale to the point where we're no longer limited. Training is no longer limited by data, limited by compute. And the reason for that is most of the data is synthetic. Then the next phase is testing. And I still remember people telling me that inference, oh yeah, that's easy. Pre-training, that's hard. These are giant systems that people are talking about. Inference must be easy. And so inference chips are going to be little tiny chips, and they're not like NVIDIA's.
Put that down, you weirdo.
bala, sí. Nivel 500.
I did not know there was a window right there, chat. I'll be honest. I don't really want to play anymore, guys. We play solos? Is that a thing? It's crazy. Nobody's playing solos.
Chips, oh, those are going to be complicated and expensive, and we could make, and this is, and in the future, inference is going to be the biggest market, and it's going to be easy, and we're going to commoditize it, and everybody can build their own chips, and that was always illogical to me, because inference is thinking, and I think thinking is hard. Thinking is way harder than reading. Pre-training is just memorization and generalization, and looking for patterns and relationships. You're reading and reading versus thinking, reasoning, solving problems, taking unexplored experiences, new experiences, and breaking it down into decomposing it into solvable pieces that we then go off either through first principle reasoning or through previous examples, prior experiences, or just exploration and search and trying different things. That whole process of test time scaling inference is really about thinking, and it's about reasoning, it's about planning, it's about search, and so how could that possibly be compute light? And we were absolutely right about that. So test time scaling is intensely compute intensive. Then the question is, okay, now we're at inference and we're at test time scaling. What's beyond that? Well, obviously, we have now created, one agentic person. And that one agentic person has a large language model that we've now developed. But during test time, that agentic system goes off and does research and bangs on databases, and it goes on and uses tools. And one of the most important things it does is spins off and spawns off a whole bunch of sub-agents, which means we're now creating large teams. It's so much easier to scale NVIDIA by hiring more employees than it is to scale myself. And so the next scaling law is the agentic scaling law. It's kind of like multiplying AI. Multiplying AI, we could spin off agents as fast as you want to spin off agents. And so, you now have 4 scaling laws. And as we use the agentic systems, they're going to create a lot more data. They're going to create a lot of experiences. Some of it we're going to say, wow, this is really good. We ought to memorize this. That data set then comes all the way back to pre-training. We memorize and generalize it. We then refine it and fine-tune it back into post-training. Then we enhance it even more with test time, in the agents and agentic systems, put it out into the industry. And so this loop, this cycle, is going to go on and on and on. It kind of comes down to basically intelligence is going to scale like one thing, and it's compute.
But there's a tricky thing there that you have to anticipate and predict, which is some of these components, it requires different kind of hardware to really do it optimally. So you have to anticipate where the AI innovation is going to lead. For example, make sure for sparsity.
Perfect.
With hardware, you can't just pivot on a week's notice. You have to anticipate what that's going to look like.
So good.
That's so scary and difficult to do, right?
For example, these AI model architectures are being invented about once every 6 months.
Yeah.
Right? And system architectures and hardware architectures
Maybe that's how you're supposed to play TPP, huh?
Kind of every 3 years. And so you need to anticipate what likely is going to happen, 2-3 years from now. And there's a couple of ways that you could do that. First of all, we could do research internally ourselves, and that's one of the reasons why we have basic research, we have applied research, we create our own models. And so we have hands-on life experience right here. This is part of the co-design that I'm talking about. We're also the only AI company in the world that works with literally every AI company in the world, and to the extent that we can, we try to get a sense of what are the challenges that people are experiencing.
So you're listening to the whispers across the industry, the AI labs?
That's right. You got to listen and learn from everybody, and have a and then the last part is to have an architecture that's flexible, that can adapt and move with the wind. And one of the benefits of CUDA is that it's, on the one hand, an incredible accelerator. On the other hand, it's really flexible. And so that balance, incredible balance between specialization, otherwise we can't accelerate the CPU, versus generalization so that we can adapt with changing algorithms, that's really, really important. That's the reason why CUDA has been so resilient on the one hand, and yet we continue to enhance it. We're at CUDA 13.2, and so we're evolving the architecture so fast that we can stay with the modern algorithms. For example, when Mixture Experts came out, that's the reason why we had NVLink 72 instead of NVLink 8. We could now take an entire 4 trillion, 10 trillion parameter model and put it in one computing domain as if it's running on one GPU. People probably...
But there's no water in here?
I said it, but if you look at the architecture of the Grace Blackwell racks, it was completely focused on doing one thing, processing the LLM. All of a sudden, 1 year later, you're looking at a Vera Rubin rack. It has storage accelerators. It has this incredible new CPU called Vera. It has Vera Rubin and NVLink 72 to run the LLMs. It also has this new additional rack called Grok. And so this entire rack system is completely different than the previous one. And it's got all these new components in it. And the reason for that is because the last one was designed to run MOE, large language models, inference, and this one is to run agents. And agents bang on tools. And
Obviously, the design of the system had to have been done before Claude Code, Codex, OpenClaw. So you were anticipating the future, essentially.
Yeah.
And that comes from what? From the whispers, from the understanding of all the state of the art.
No, it's easier than that. You just reason about it. First of all, you just reason. No matter what happens, at some point, in order for that large language model to be a digital worker, let's just use that metaphor. Let's say that we want the LLM to be a digital worker. What does it have to do? It has to access ground truth. That's our file system. It has to be able to do research. It doesn't know everything. We don't have, and I don't want to wait until this AI becomes, universally smart about everything, past, present, and future, before I make it useful. And so therefore, I might as well let it go do research. It's obviously, if it wants to help me, it's got to use my tools. You know, a lot of people would say, you know, AI is going to completely destroy software. We don't need software anymore. We don't even need tools anymore. That's ridiculous. Let's use a thought experiment. And you could just sit there, enjoy a glass of whiskey, and think about all these things, and it would become completely obvious. Like if I were to create the most amazing agent that we can imagine in the next 10 years, let's say be a humanoid robot. If that humanoid robot were to be created, is it more likely that the humanoid robot comes into my house and uses the tools that I have to do the work that it needs to do? Or does this hand turns into a 10-pound hammer in one instance, turns into a scalpel in another instance, and in order to boil water, it beams, you know, microwaves out of its fingers, you know? Or is it more likely just to use a microwave, you know? And the first time it goes up to the microwave, it probably doesn't know how to use it, but that's okay. It's connected to the internet. It reads the manual of this microwave, reads it, instantly becomes an expert, and so uses it. And so I think I just described, in fact, almost all of the properties of OpenClaw. You know, that it's going to use tools, that it's going to access files, it's going to be able to do research. It has I/O subsystem, and when you're done reasoning about it through it in that way, then you say, oh my gosh, the impact to the future computing is deeply profound. And the reason for that is, I think we've just reinvented the computer. And then now you say, okay, when did we reason about that? When did we reason about OpenClaw? If you take the OpenClaw schematic that I used at GTC, you will find it 2 years ago. Literally 2 years ago at GTC, I was talking about agentic systems that exactly reflect OpenClaw today. And of course, the confluence of many things had to happen. First of all, we needed Claude and GPT and, you know, all of these models to reach a level of capability. So their innovation and their breakthroughs and their continued advances was really important. And then, of course, somebody had to create an open source, you know, project that was sufficiently robust, you know, and sufficiently complete, and that we can all put to work. And I think OpenClaw did for agentic systems what ChatGPT did for generative systems, and I just think it's a very big deal.
Yeah, it's a really special moment. I'm not exactly sure why it captured so much of the world's attention, but it did, more than Claude Code and Codex and so on.
Because consumers could reach it.
Sure, yeah. But there's also so much of this is vibes. And Peter had a podcast with him. He's a wonderful human being. So part of it is also the humans that represent the thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Part of it is memes, and because we're all trying to figure it out. There's really serious and complicated security concerns about when you have such powerful technology, how do you hand over your data so that it can do useful stuff, but then there's scary things associated with that, and we as a civilization, as individual people and as a civilization, figuring out how to find that right balance.
Yeah, we jumped on it right away. We sent a bunch of security experts his way, and we did this thing called OpenShell. It's already been integrated into OpenClaw.
And NVIDIA put forward NemoClaw. The install is super easy. It makes sure that it's secure.
We give you 2 out of 3 rights. Agentic systems can access sensitive information, it can execute code, and it can communicate externally.
Cover your hands. Reduce the risk. Find solutions here and get
We could keep things safe if we gave you 2 out of those 3 capabilities at any time, but not all 3. And out of those 2 out of 3 capabilities, we also give you access control based on whatever rights that you're given by enterprise. And then we connect it to a policy engine that all these enterprises already have. And so we're going to try to do our best to help OpenClaw become a better claw.
So you eloquently explained how we have a long history of blockers that we thought were going to be blockers, and we overcame them. But now looking into the future, what do you think might be the blockers now that it's clear that agents will be everywhere? So it's obviously we're going to need compute. So what is going to be the blocker for that scaling?
Energy.
Power is a concern, but it's not the only concern. But that's the reason why we're pushing so hard on extreme co-design, so that we can improve the tokens per second, per watt, orders of magnitude every single year. And so in the last 10 years, Moore's Law would have progressed computing about 100 times in the last 10 years. We progressed and scaled up computing by 1 million times in the last 10 years. And so we're going to keep on doing that through extreme co-design. So energy efficiency, perf per watt, completely affects the revenues of a company. It affects the revenues of a factory, and we're just going to push that to the limit so that we could keep on driving token costs down as fast as we can. You know, our computer price is going up, but our token generation effectiveness is going up so much faster that token cost is coming down. It's coming down an order of magnitude every year.
So power, that's an interesting one. So the way to try to get around the power blocker is to try to, with the token per second per watt, try to make it more and more efficient. Of course, there's the question of how do we get more power.
We should also get more power.
That's a really complicated one. You talked about small modular nuclear power plants. There's all kinds of ideas about energy. How much does it keep you up at night? The bottlenecks in the supply chain.
God damn, I can't run and reload, huh?
ASML with EUV lithography machines, TSMC with advanced packaging like CoWoS, and SK Hynix with high bandwidth memory.
All the time, and we're working on it all the time. No company in history has ever grown at a scale that we're